Lyle, like Kate and I, Lyle Shelton is someone who has nailed his colours to the mast. Lyle is well known for his campaign against same-sex marriage and the Safe Schools program. He is a man of principle, a man of faith, and a man who is willing to fight for what he believes in. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Lyle Shelton, our number one on the Australian Service.
Well, thanks very much, Joe, for that very warm welcome, and Kate, thanks for your words as well. It's been a great privilege for me being on the Senate ticket with both Kate and Joe, and I didn't know either of them that well, although I had met Joe in a previous life. As a lobbyist, I would lobby her as a senator. Now, as a Senate candidate, she lobbies me as someone on the... And Kate has shown me around North Queensland, a place that I'd only ever been a fly-in, fly-out visitor to, but we've spent many drives from Mackay north to Cairns and back again, and really come to appreciate the place and fall in love with it as well. It's a long way away. I keep telling Kevin Bailey, our candidate in Victoria, that I am closer to Kevin than I am to our people in Cairns that are out there campaigning for us, so it's a big state. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of tonight as well. And so many of you have supported us, particularly over the last 18 months or so as we've been trying to build the party and get ready for this election. So many of you have donated. Thank you so much for that, and have given of your time and your energy. And you're here tonight to show your support at this very important launch. I'm running for the Senate because I think that our country is in serious trouble. I think Canberra has become a common sense free zone, apart from the place that Cory Bernardi occupies in the Red Chamber. And sadly, it's become a truth free zone. And we're in a lot of trouble as a nation. I know that Donald Trump is a very controversial figure, but his whole thing about making America great again wasn't actually his phrase. It came from Ronald Reagan. And in some ways, I want to add a little bit of Trumpian sort of flair into this Australian election campaign without the big hair, the big ego and the narcissism and perhaps some of the other barnacles. But I do have a Twitter account that triggers about 9,600 lefties who follow me. But I don't think that Australians are looking for another Trump, to be really, really honest. But I think we are looking for something to shake up the political system. And as Joe has quite eloquently said, this is a trend that's developing right across the globe. I've been to a conference where Viktor Orban and some of his ministers spoke in Hungary. They are not fascists. They are people who believe what we are believing, and they're taking their country back from the EU, which is a multinational, transnational, anti-family institution. And we're part of that sort of global pushback that's coming. Some have described Donald Trump like chemotherapy, and that's probably not a bad explanation. Chemotherapy is pretty rough stuff if you've had cancer treatment, but I guess it just depends on how serious you take cancer. And I do think we've got a serious problem in our body politic. Kate's mentioned vegan terrorism. Just a few weeks ago, I got a tip-off on a Sunday night about the rallying point of some vegans that were leaving Brisbane to go and terrorise farmers and agribusinesses in southeast Queensland. And I found out their rendezvous point, and so I set my alarm for 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got up and drove down to this secret location in Windsor where people were sort of skulking about in the dark of night. There was a police breathalyse test there, testing for blood alcohol and also drugs. I'd never been drug tested in my life before. A couple of the vegans, I understand, found out later had failed the drug test. But I sort of waited there, parked there, half sort of expecting someone to come and start rocking my car. But I had read on the vegans' Facebook page that they were pacifists, so I thought I was pretty safe. Anyway, their convoy set out, and I was genuinely actually worried because I have some friends who have a chicken abattoir at Inglewood, and they were very worried that these guys might be targeting them. So I infiltrated the convoy, we headed out. I was in touch with Martin Bella from the Green Shirts on the phone, and I was able to tell him that they'd turned left onto the Cunningham Highway and they're heading out towards Warwick. And he had people set up on the Warrego Highway towards Toowoomba, and so they came and we all sort of rendezvoused. Meanwhile, the vegans tried to lose me. They realised that I'd infiltrated their convoy, wasn't one of them, and so I was led on a wild goose chase around the back roads of Freestone out the back of Warwick. But eventually they couldn't shake me, so they took me to their protest destination, which was Carey Brothers. This is funny to you, is it, Senator? I didn't tell the boss that I was doing this. I didn't break the speed limit. We ended up at Carey Brothers Meatworks at Killarney. And by the time I got there, the protest was well in swing, and these terrorists had chained themselves to the equipment at the abattoir, and their protesters from Brisbane were all rocking up, and the workers were really upset. They were at the gate, they couldn't go to work, and some of them were a little bit abusive to the vegans, but you can't blame them. And I ended up getting in a conversation with one of the vegans, this fellow from Spain, of all places, with these dreadlocks, lovely young fellow. And I said, mate, I'd probably take you a little bit more seriously if you guys had the same zeal for protecting the human rights of the unborn. And he said, no, I think we should not, abort babies, at 8 months or anything like this. And I said, well, what about 7 months and 3 weeks, And I said, mate, your guru, Peter Singer, says that, it's okay to kill babies until they're a sentient being. And he goes, Peter Singer, he wrote Animal Liberation. He couldn't believe that Peter Singer would allow a baby to be killed 3 months after birth because the baby isn't sentient and has no idea that it has a life worth living. And so that really messed with his worldview. But this is the sort of thing that we are fighting, because up until about 5 minutes ago in Western history, because of what the West had given us, and Kate mentioned our Judeo-Christian heritage, we knew instinctively that human life was on a different plane to animal life. But these vegans don't believe that. They believe that vegans have the same moral culpability as humans. They should be protected in the same way. And of course, that is something that Western people have never believed, because we've always believed that humans are special creatures made in the image and likeness of God. Conservatives have always believed in the transcendent. But this is what we're up against. And the Greens, a political party, who of course support this vegan terrorism, they have that sort of similar worldview as well. We have to diagnose the problem that we're fighting. We're fighting something that has infiltrated our body politic. And I believe it needs to be named, and many commentators are starting to name it more and more these days, and it's cultural Marxism. Now, you might have thought Marxism disappeared with the Berlin Wall in 1990. Well, it hasn't. It's just changed. People didn't much like gulags and guns and tanks and concentration camps and the like, but now we have human rights commissions and anti-discrimination tribunals. It's all the same thing, to control your thought and to have this totalitarian instinct. But the goals of Marxism are fourfold: destroy the family, destroy religion, destroy private property, and destroy the nation. And I want to say to you tonight that each of those goals have been achieved and aided and abetted on the watch of a so-called conservative government. And let me give you some examples. Destroy the family. Well, it was the 5 rebel Liberals in the middle of 2017 who held a metaphorical gun to Malcolm Turnbull's head and said, "Give us gay marriage or we will cross the floor and vote with Bill Shorten and hand the Parliament, the control of the Parliament, over to Bill Shorten so we can get a gay marriage bill into the Parliament." That's how we got the plebiscite, folks. And I think Australians voted in that marriage plebiscite because they were just sick of the issue because of the Fabian tactics that Joe outlined of the relentless chipping away. But that was the Liberal Party who facilitated this, a party that helped facilitate a Marxist agenda of destroy the family. Robert Menzies would be rolling in his grave. In 1946, he gave one of his famous radio addresses called Christianity and Communism, and he said, "If you secure a copy of the Communist Manifesto and look at Chapter 2, you will see how it embraces the abolition of the family, the abolition of what is called bourgeois marriage, the abolition of country and nationality." He went on and on. Anyone who would think that the founder of the Liberal Party would have supported those rebel Liberals who forced the Liberal Party to change its policy on marriage and tear down one of our basic institutions in society and redefine it with all the injustice that flows for children who never get to know their mum and dad. That happened on the watch of a Liberal Party government. Goal of Marxism. Destroy religion. Well, flowing on from the whole same-sex marriage issue, you've now got the Christian school movement in Australia and the Muslim school movement worried that they can't teach their definition of marriage. And of course, the Ruddock Commission was set up to try and address that. But again, because the Liberal Party is infiltrated by cultural Marxists, they were unable to resolve religious freedom issues after a whole year of debate last year. And we've gone into the election with that issue kicked down the can and possibly left to a Labor government who doesn't even believe it at all. Destroying private property. Well, we've this is probably more something on the Labor side of politics, but the whole franking credit issue, Bill Shorten thinks that, your money, even though it's been taxed once, should be taxed again. We've got vegetation management laws in this state which take away property rights of farmers. They can't even clear regrowth. I don't understand why the federal Conservative government doesn't mount a High Court challenge, because there hasn't been just and fair compensation provided. These are big issues. Private property is not seen as something which is worth protecting. Destroy the nation. Well, that's one of the great aspects of cultural Marxism. They believe in open borders, empires, transnational organisations like the EU and the UN. Now, don't get me wrong, we should be good global citizens, but these organisations shouldn't control our nation. Part of destroying the nation is smashing its economy. We have a situation now where our country, one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, has an energy crisis. The Energy Minister, Angus Taylor, regularly talks about keeping the lights on. That should never be a discussion in a country like Australia. We've got into a real mess, and neither side of politics are addressing this. The economic modelling done by Brian Fisher for the Page Research, which is the National Party's think tank, the Page Research Centre, says that Labor's climate change policy will take away 750,000 jobs, the Coalition's 350,000 jobs. It's Tweedledee and Tweedledummer. We don't have a proper energy policy going into this election, and of course no one's talking about the big issues. And this is because we've had a green left view of the world that's been driving policy in this nation. It's turned the pillars of our society into pariahs. It's turned farmers into pariahs. It's turned small business people, self-funded retirees, and anyone trying to get ahead. And of course, it's turned Christians into pariahs. Just look at Israel Folau. This is the environment that we are in now as a nation. Well, how was Marxism beaten in its totalitarian and brutal militaristic form? Well, it was beaten because of resistance movements. And I love looking at the resistance leaders of Eastern Europe. And one of my favourites is Václav Havel, and I probably butchered the pronunciation of his name. But he very famously said to his people, don't live under the lie. Resist the lie. We have to resist the lies that are coming out of Canberra, that are coming out of our fake news media all the time. It's a lie that we can trash the natural family and expect there to be no consequences for our society. It's a lie that we don't need religion, because a democratic society can only be free if the people are virtuous, and virtue comes from the religion. That's what the American founding fathers saw, who created the first experiment in democracy. They all said that, and you only have to look at the writings of Jefferson and Washington and John Jay and Adams. They all recognised that this was pivotal. But no, we are trashing religion, and particularly Christianity, and we think that somehow we can still have a virtuous society and a free society that will function and work. No, it's falling down around our eyes. It's a lie that private property and private wealth should largely be controlled and dictated by the state. It's a lie that the nation state and its sovereignty should be subsumed by some sort of global order. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, but it's worth repeating because everyone should know about Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He spent years in a communist gulag in Siberia for criticising the state. He was a soldier in the Red Army. And he finally made it out to the West, having had his seminal work, The Gulag Archipelago, a famous book, smuggled out, which saved his life. The fact that the West heard about it. Found his way to America. But he became very disturbed by what he saw in America in the 1970s. And he gave a famous lecture at Harvard University where he did what he went there to do, and that was to criticise communism and say that the West is superior. But then he turned his sights on the West, and he said the West also has the seeds of its own destruction in it. He said the leaders in the West no longer have the will and the courage to defend the values of the West. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the problem that we have in modern day Australia. We don't have a political class that has the will and the courage to defend who we are. We have cultural Marxism being outworked on the watch of a liberal government in this country. All of those aspects have been aided and abetted on the watch of a liberal government. I saw this as as a lobbyist in Canberra for 10 years, and it's what's driven me like a bear with a sore head to this political movement, because I'm sick of good people who I know believe what you and I in this room believe, but because of fear, because of political correctness, because of a lack of courage, are not willing to get up and fight every day like the Greens get up and fight every day for their crazy ideas, which have now become mainstream, which has now overtaken even a large cohort of the Liberal Party. Our party, as you've heard tonight, stands for small government, lower taxes, reliable and affordable electricity, the natural family, and even that is a politically incorrect thing to say. We're allowed to talk about the natural environment, but you're not allowed to say the word natural family. We believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic. Anyone who knows anything about Western civilization knows that's where the freedoms have come from, whether you are a religious person or not. That's where the freedoms that have come from. And just have a look at, Asia and Africa if you want to see alternative worldviews, and they're out working. That's why everyone wants to come and live here. We believe in civil society. The government isn't the answer first and foremost. Civil society, we, the people, are the answer. These are the things which the political class no longer are willing to fight for. Well, we're in a battle, folks. The space is very contested and congested here in Queensland in the minor party space. There's about 2 potential spots on the Senate, in the Senate that are available at this election, and there's you might have noticed some yellow billboards and someone with red hair and another guy with big hats getting around the state. And look, there are many areas of commonality, obviously, on this side of politics. But what we offer uniquely in this party is a principled and credible and sensible approach. And this is the first election where anyone has had in Australia the opportunity to vote for a party that is genuinely conservative and that stands for these values in a principled way. As Joe said, over 20 years, the Greens got a foothold in the Senate. We've got to get a foothold in the Senate and start to fight back. Sadly, the political class have lost the will and the courage to do that, and that's why we need this movement. This election really is, to paraphrase the words of Abraham Lincoln in 1863 when he was trying to hold the Union together. He said that America and keeping the Union together was the world's last best hope, he said. And that's why he didn't want the Union to fall apart. I think that this political movement that we're a part of tonight, that is growing all over the world, is the last best hope. And this election is a crucial time for us. We're not a party that can win government, but with your help, we can be a voice in the Senate to bring back common sense. Thank you, and God bless you.